name right!"
She called her Blackie. Not once, not twice, but over and over again, right there in first class, while dozens of passengers watched in stunned silence. The little girl was only 8 years old, traveling alone for the first time, clutching a stuffed elephant like it was the only friend she had left in the world. Her name was Zara Monroe, and she had no idea that in just a few hours, the woman tormenting her would lose everything. The flight attendant had no idea either. She had no idea who this little girl's mother was. She had no idea that karma doesn't always wait for another lifetime. Sometimes it arrives at the gate before you even land. That morning started like any other spring day. Zara stood in the doorway of her home, her small suitcase packed with carefully folded clothes, her favorite books, and that worn stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. Her mother, Dr. Amara Monroe, knelt down in front of her, adjusting the unaccompanied minor tag that hung around Zara's neck like a bright yellow badge. The morning sun caught the beads in Zara's braids, making them shimmer with every nervous movement of her head. "Remember what I told you, baby," Amara said, her hands gentle but firm on her daughter's shoulders. "Be brave, be kind, and always remember who you are." Zara nodded, trying to look confident even though her stomach was doing somersaults. This was her first time flying alone. 8 years old, and she was about to board a plane to Chicago by herself to spend spring break with her grandmother. The excitement and nervousness warred inside her chest, making it hard to breathe normally. She loved airplanes. Always had. Since she was tiny, barely able to hold a crayon properly, she'd been drawing them in her notebooks, studying how they worked, asking her mother 1,000 questions about wings and engines and how something so massive and heavy could possibly stay in the sky. Her mother always answered every question with patience, never talking down to her, always treating her curiosity like the precious thing it was. Amara had arranged for Zara to sit in first class. A special treat. An upgrade that would make the journey more comfortable and ensure her daughter had extra attention from the flight crew. Zara had been thrilled when she found out. She'd never sat in first class before. She imagined big seats like thrones, warm chocolate chip cookies, maybe even getting to peek into the cockpit if she was really, really lucky and asked politely. "You're going to do great," Amara said, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. She breathed in the smell of her daughter's hair, that mixture of shea butter and childhood innocence. "Grandma will be waiting for you at the gate. And I'll call you the second you land, okay?" Zara hugged her mother back fiercely, breathing in her familiar perfume, trying to memorize the feeling of safety. "I love you, Mom. I love you more, baby girl. More than all the stars in the sky and all the planes in the air." Amara kissed the top of her head, then pulled back to look into her daughter's eyes. Those beautiful brown eyes that saw the world with such hope and wonder. "You remember your phone is in your backpack, right? And you have Grandma's number memorized?" "Yes, Mom. I remember everything." Zara smiled, trying to reassure her mother even though she was the one who needed reassuring. At the airport, everything went smoothly at first. The gate agent who checked Zara in was a warm, friendly woman with kind eyes who complimented her backpack covered in airplane stickers. She made sure Zara's unaccompanied minor paperwork was all in order, then radioed ahead to let the flight crew know their special passenger was on her way. While waiting to board, Zara sat cross-legged in the terminal near the massive windows, her notebook open in her lap, sketching planes. She drew the curve of the wings with careful attention to detail, the powerful engines that looked like they could swallow clouds, the way the tail fin cut through the sky like a shark's fin through water. Other travelers walked past, rushing to their gates, stressed and distracted. But Zara was lost in her own world of aviation dreams and possibilities. When boarding was called for passengers needing special assistance and those traveling with small children, Zara stood up confidently. Her boarding pass was clutched in her small hand, slightly wrinkled now from nervous fingers. She walked down the jetway with her head held high, just like her mother had taught her. The tunnel connecting the terminal to the plane smelled like jet fuel and recycled air and possibility. Her heart raced with excitement, the nervousness finally giving way to pure joy. She was doing it. She was flying alone like a big girl, like someone capable and brave. As she stepped onto the aircraft, a flight attendant greeted her at the door. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. His name tag read Michael, and something about him immediately put Zara at ease. "You must be Zara," he said warmly, his voice gentle but not condescending. "Come on, let me show you to your seat. You're in 2A today. That's a window seat right up front in first class." Michael carried her backpack for her, leading her through the first-class cabin. Zara's eyes went wide. The seats were enormous, covered in soft leather the color of cream. Each one had its own reading light, its own TV screen, its own little control panel with more buttons than she knew what to do with. Everything looked so fancy, so grown up, so far removed from the cramped economy seats she'd sat in on family vacations. She felt a little thrill of pride ripple through her chest. She belonged here. Her ticket said so. Her mother had made sure of it. "Here we are," Michael said, helping her stow her backpack in the overhead bin, making sure it was secure. "And look, you've got a neighbor already." In seat 2B sat a middle-aged Asian man in an expensive-looking business suit, his laptop open on the tray table, fingers flying across the keyboard. He looked up when Michael spoke and immediately smiled at Zara, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face into something approachable and kind. "Hello there," the man said, closing his laptop to give her his full attention. "I'm Robert Chen. What's your name?" "Zara," she replied, suddenly feeling shy under the attention of this successful-looking stranger. "Nice to meet you, Zara. That's a beautiful name. Hey, would you like the window seat? I've flown so many times for work, I don't even look out the window anymore. But I bet you'd enjoy it, especially if this is a special trip." Zara's eyes lit up like someone had just offered her the moon. "Really? Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother." "Absolutely not a bother. I insist. Go ahead, take the window. I'll be working most of the flight anyway." Robert stood up, gathering his laptop and briefcase, making room for them to switch seats. They traded places, and Zara immediately pressed her face close to the small oval window, watching everything. The ground crew in their orange vests loading luggage into the belly of the plane, moving with practiced efficiency. The fuel trucks maneuvering around like something out of a choreographed dance. All the organized chaos of an airport preparing for flight, a ballet of logistics and engineering that most passengers never noticed or thought about. But Zara noticed everything. She drank it all in, committing every detail to memory so she could tell her grandmother about it later. Robert smiled at her enthusiasm and went back to his work, occasionally glancing over to make sure she was comfortable. Everything felt perfect. Zara couldn't believe how nice everyone was, how smooth everything was going. First class was everything she'd hoped for and more. The seat was so comfortable it felt like sitting on a cloud. She imagined telling her friends at school about this, about her adventure, about flying alone in first class like some kind of junior executive. But then Sharon Whitmore arrived for her shift and everything changed. Sharon was running late that day, irritation written across her face in deep lines as she rushed through the airport employee entrance, her uniform slightly wrinkled, her hair not quite as perfect as it should have been. She was a woman in her late 40s, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that gave her a perpetually severe look, and lips pressed into a permanent line of displeasure that no amount of lipstick could soften. 15 years she'd been working for this airline. 15 long years of dealing with demanding passengers who treated her like a servant, crying babies who screamed for hours, drunk businessmen who got handsy after too many tiny bottles of vodka, endless complaints about pillows that weren't fluffy enough and blankets that weren't warm enough and meal choices that somehow were never quite right. Her divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, and the wound was still raw, still bleeding. Her ex-husband had left her for a younger woman, a perky 28-year-old yoga instructor named Brittany with 2 T's and a smile like sunshine. Someone who probably never had a stressed day in her life, who probably woke up every morning grateful and centered and all those other things Sharon couldn't manage anymore. The settlement had been less than Sharon thought she deserved. Much less. Money was tight now. Her apartment was smaller. Her car was older. Life felt profoundly unfair, like the universe had decided to punish her specifically for crimes she couldn't name. As she clocked in and checked her assignment for the day, Sharon allowed herself a small smile. First class. Her favorite section. Better tips, fewer passengers, people who generally knew how to behave and didn't need their hands held through every moment of the flight. She could get through this shift, collect her paycheck, go home to her empty apartment and pour herself a very large glass of wine and try not to think about how Brittany with 2 T's was probably doing couples yoga with her ex-husband right now. In the crew area, she ran into Michael, who was checking supplies and making notes on his tablet. "Cutting it close today, Sharon," he said pleasantly, not looking up from his work. "Traffic was a nightmare," she muttered, not meeting his eyes, not wanting to admit she'd overslept after staying up too late scrolling through her ex-husband's social media like picking at a scab. "Besides, I'm here now, aren't I? That's what matters." Michael didn't respond to her sharp tone. He'd worked with Sharon long enough to know she was perpetually bitter about something, always carrying some invisible weight that made her snappish and cold. There'd been complaints about her before over the years, whispered conversations among crew members about things she'd said, the way she treated certain passengers differently than others, how her smile went cold when serving some people. But Sharon had seniority union protection, and somehow those complaints never seemed to stick. They'd get filed, investigated in the most cursory way, and then dismissed with a note in her file and a stern talking to that she'd ignore. She always had an explanation, always made it sound like the passengers were overreacting or misunderstanding or being too sensitive. And management, tired and overworked themselves, usually took the path of least resistance. "We've got an unaccompanied minor in first class today," Michael mentioned casually, still focused on his tablet. 8 years old. C2A. Sweet kid named Zara. Just wanted you to know in case you're working that section. Sharon's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of something crossing her face. A child? In first class? That's unusual. Yep. Valid ticket, all properly arranged through the system. She's traveling alone to see her grandmother in Chicago. Mother set everything up weeks ago, paid for the upgrade, wanted her daughter comfortable. Sharon made a non-committal sound deep in her throat and headed toward the aircraft, her sensible work shoes clicking against the jetway floor. A child in first class. That was unusual. Irregular. First class was supposed to be the peaceful section, the sanctuary, the place where people paid extra to avoid the chaos of families and children and all the noise and mess that came with them. As she boarded the plane and began her pre-flight checks, going through the familiar motions she could do in her sleep, she made her way through the cabin, greeting passengers with her professional smile that never quite reached her eyes, the smile that was all muscle memory and no warmth. And then she saw her. C2A. A little black girl with elaborately braided hair adorned with colorful beads that clicked softly when she moved her head, wearing a purple sweater that looked soft and expensive and jeans with little rhinestones on the pockets, that stuffed elephant on her lap held like a talisman. The unaccompanied minor tag around her neck, bright yellow and impossible to miss. Sharon felt something twist in her chest, that familiar ugly feeling she'd learned to recognize over the years but never quite learned to control or examine too closely. Her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched. All the frustrations of her life, all the bitterness and disappointment and rage she carried, suddenly had a focus. She checked her manifest, running her finger down the list of names with more force than necessary, as if the paper had personally offended her. There it was. Zara Monroe. C2A. Unaccompanied minor. First class. Everything was in order, all the paperwork correct, which somehow made Sharon even more annoyed. There was no mistake to correct, no error to fix, no reason this child shouldn't be sitting exactly where she was sitting. And yet Sharon couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that this child didn't belong in this space, in this section reserved for business executives and wealthy travelers and people who understood how to behave. She looked at the little girl, then at the expensive first-class seat she occupied, taking up space Sharon felt she had no right to, and made a decision she would very soon regret. A decision that would cost her everything. Sharon approached with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, the kind of smile that made people uncomfortable even if they couldn't quite say why. "Sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with false kindness that curdled in the air, "I think you're in the wrong section." Zara looked up from her window, confusion crossing her face. She'd been watching a luggage cart drive past, imagining she was piloting it like a tiny airplane. What? What do you mean? This is first class, honey. These seats are very expensive. For premium passengers. I think your seat is probably back in economy where most of the families sit. Let me help you find it so we can get you settled properly. Zara's heart started beating faster, that nervous flutter she'd felt that morning returning with force. Something in this woman's voice made her skin prickle. She reached for her boarding pass, which she'd tucked carefully into the seat pocket in front of her, her hands trembling slightly. "No, ma'am. This is my seat. See?" She held up the boarding pass, the paper crinkling in her nervous grip. "2A, that's this seat. This is where I'm supposed to be." Sharon barely glanced at it, dismissing it with a wave of her hand like it was irrelevant. Sometimes there are mistakes with the computer system. It happens all the time. These seats are very expensive, Blackie. Economy is in the back where you'll be more comfortable with the other passengers who are more like you. The word hung in the air like poison, like smoke, like something that couldn't be taken back. Blackie. Zara's eyes went wide, her breath catching in her throat. She'd never been called that before. Never. Her mother had talked to her about racism, about the fact that some people might treat her differently because of the color of her skin, but it had always seemed abstract, theoretical, like something from history books and not something that would happen to her in real life, on an airplane, in first class, surrounded by all these people. She wasn't entirely sure what the word meant exactly, but she knew from the way Sharon said it, from the curl of her lip, from the cold satisfaction in her eyes, that it was something bad. Something meant to diminish and hurt and put her in what this woman considered her proper place. Robert Chen's head snapped up from his laptop so fast he almost knocked over his coffee cup. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Sharon turned to him, her expression cooling several degrees, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Sir, I'm handling a seating issue with this child. It doesn't concern you." "That's not a seating issue," Robert said, his voice hard as steel, controlled but barely containing his anger. "That's completely inappropriate. You just used a racial slur against an 8-year-old child. In front of a plane full of witnesses." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sharon replied, but her cheeks flushed slightly, a tell she couldn't control. Her hands fidgeted with her tablet. "I'm simply trying to verify that this child is in the correct seat. First class is for paying premium passengers, and I need to ensure that there hasn't been some kind of system error that—" "She showed you her boarding pass," Robert interrupted, his voice rising slightly, drawing more attention from surrounding passengers. "It clearly shows seat 2A. It has her name on it. It's a legitimate ticket. What more verification do you possibly need? What's the real issue here?" Other passengers were beginning to notice the commotion now, the tension rippling through the cabin like electricity. Heads turned from across the aisle, from rows behind them. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A woman in row 3 lowered her magazine. A man in row 1 paused his phone call. The air in the cabin felt thick and charged. Zara felt tears burning behind her eyes, hot and shameful, but she fought them back with everything she had. "Be brave," her mother had said. "Be brave." But being brave was so much harder than she'd thought it would be. Her hands clutched the stuffed elephant tighter, her knuckles going pale with the force of her grip. "Sir, I don't appreciate your tone," Sharon said, standing up straighter, trying to reassert her authority through posture and volume. "If you continue to be disruptive, if you continue to interfere with my duties, I'll have to call the captain. I can have you removed from this flight." "Please do," Robert said evenly, his jaw set, his eyes never leaving Sharon's face. "I'd absolutely love to explain to the captain exactly what I just heard. In detail. And I'm sure these other passengers would be happy to corroborate." A murmur of agreement rippled through the nearby rows. The woman in row 3 nodded emphatically. The man who'd been on his phone was now recording with his camera, holding it discreetly but deliberately. Before the situation could escalate further, before Sharon could make another terrible decision, Michael appeared from the back of the cabin, drawn by the raised voices and the sudden tension he could feel even from the galley. "Is everything okay here? What's going on?" "This child is in the wrong seat," Sharon said quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush, trying to control the narrative. "I was just about to help her relocate to economy where her actual assigned seat is. There's clearly been some kind of computer error in the system." Michael's brow furrowed, confusion crossing his kind face. He pulled out his tablet and tapped through several screens, checking the manifest, the seating chart, the passenger list. "Sharon, her seat is correct. Zara Monroe, seat 2A, unaccompanied minor, first-class ticket purchased and confirmed 3 weeks ago. I checked her and myself less than 20 minutes ago. Everything is in order." Sharon's face went through several expressions in rapid succession like cards being shuffled. Anger, embarrassment, defiance, panic, before finally settling on cold professionalism, the mask she wore when she knew she'd been caught but refused to admit it. "Fine. If the system says this is correct, then I suppose it must be." She looked down at Zara, and her eyes were icy, filled with a hatred so pure and undisguised that it made the little girl shrink back in her seat. "I'll be watching you though. First-class passengers are expected to behave appropriately. Any problems, any disturbances and you'll be moved. Do you understand me?" She turned and walked away before anyone could respond, her shoulders rigid with barely contained fury, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Michael gave Zara an apologetic smile, his eyes sad and tired like he'd seen this before and hated that he was seeing it again. "You're all good, sweetheart. That's absolutely, definitely your seat. Nobody's moving you anywhere. Can I get you anything? Some water? Juice? Maybe some cookies once we're in the air." Zara nodded, not trusting her voice, afraid that if she tried to speak she'd start crying and never stop. Michael squeezed her shoulder gently, a gesture of comfort and solidarity, and moved on to attend to other passengers, though he glanced back at her several times with concern etched on his face. Robert looked at Zara, really looked at her, seeing the tears she was fighting so hard to hold back. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice gentle now, all the anger from moments before transformed into compassion. Zara nodded again, but a single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek, hot and shameful. She wiped it away quickly with the back of her hand, embarrassed to be crying, embarrassed to be the center of attention, embarrassed that this woman had made her feel so small in front of all these people. Why did she call me that? Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Robert's expression was pained, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. Some people carry hate in their hearts, Zara. Real, deep-down hate that they've been feeding for years. It has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with who you are as a person, and everything to do with them and their own brokenness. But that doesn't make it hurt any less, does it? No, Zara whispered, more tears threatening to fall. It doesn't. Listen to me, Robert said, leaning closer, his voice firm but kind. You belong in this seat just as much as anyone else on this plane. More, even, because you handled that situation with way more grace and dignity than I would have at your age. Hell, more than I did at my age, and I'm 43. Don't let her make you feel small. Don't give her that power over you. Zara looked at him, this kind stranger who'd stood up for her when he didn't have to, who'd gotten angry on her behalf when it would have been easier to just mind his own business and go back to his laptop. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for helping me. Anytime, kiddo. Anytime. Robert pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. You keep this. If you need anything during this flight or if that woman bothers you again, you come get me immediately. And when you get to your grandmother's house, you have your mom call me. I want to make sure you're okay, and I want to file a formal complaint about what just happened here. Zara took the card, looking at it through her tears. Robert Chen, Vice President of Operations, Chen Industries. She tucked it carefully into her pocket like it was something precious. But as the plane prepared for takeoff, as the safety demonstration began with flight attendants miming the use of oxygen masks and seat belts, as the engines roared to life with that deep, powerful sound that usually thrilled Zara, she couldn't shake the cold knot of dread in her stomach. Sharon was still on this plane. Still working this flight. Still in charge of her section. And from the look she'd given Zara before walking away, that look of pure, undisguised hatred, this was far from over. The little girl clutched her stuffed elephant tighter and stared out the window as the ground fell away beneath them, as Chicago and her home and her mother got farther and farther away, wishing more than anything that Amara was sitting beside her, that her mother's hand was holding hers, that she wasn't alone up here in the sky with a woman who hated her for no reason she could understand. Sharon, meanwhile, stood in the galley area at the back of first class, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, hands gripping the counter with enough force to make her knuckles white. That little girl in first class. That little black girl taking up space where she didn't belong, acting like she had every right to be there, embarrassing Sharon in front of passengers and crew. And that Asian man who dared to challenge her, to accuse her of things she'd never, ever admit to saying, not under oath, not to management, not to anyone. The rage simmered just beneath her professional exterior like magma waiting to erupt. This flight was going to be long. 5 hours to Chicago. 5 hours trapped on this plane with that child. And if Sharon had anything to say about it, that little girl was going to learn her place, was going to understand that there were consequences for making Sharon look bad. High above the earth, as the plane leveled out at cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, as passengers began pulling out laptops and books and settling in for the journey, two women who had never met were on a collision course that would change everything. One was a bitter flight attendant with 15 years of barely concealed prejudice and a belief that her seniority made her untouchable. The other was a billionaire CEO in a corner office hundreds of miles away, who was about to get a phone call about her daughter that would make her blood run cold. And Sharon Whitmore had absolutely no idea what was about to hit her. She had no idea that karma sometimes works faster than you think. She had no idea that the wheels of justice were already turning. She had no idea that by the time this plane landed, her entire life would be over. The flight attendant call button dinged in the galley, and Sharon took a deep breath, pasted on her professional smile, and went back out into the cabin. She had a job to do. Passengers to serve. And a little girl to put in her place. An hour into the flight, the cabin had settled into the usual rhythm of air travel. Most passengers were absorbed in their own worlds, reading, working, sleeping, watching movies on their personal screens. The hum of the engines provided a constant white noise backdrop. Outside the windows, clouds stretched endlessly, cotton white against brilliant blue. Zara sat pressed against her window, her notebook open on her tray table, trying to distract herself by drawing. But her hands shook slightly, making the lines of her airplane sketch wobbly and imperfect. She kept glancing toward the galley, waiting for Sharon to reappear, dreading the next confrontation she felt was inevitable. Sharon emerged from the galley pushing the beverage cart, her face a mask of professional pleasantness that didn't reach her eyes. She worked her way down the aisle systematically, offering drinks and snacks to passengers, her smile mechanical and cold. Row by row she approached. Zara's anxiety mounted with each passing minute, her heart beating faster as Sharon got closer. Coffee? Something to drink? Sharon's voice was sickeningly sweet with the passenger in row 1. Then row 2 began. She stopped at Robert's seat. Sir, what can I get for you? Coffee black, please, Robert said, watching her carefully. And I'd like to order something for my young friend here. Sharon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her smile. Of course. And what would the child like? She didn't look at Zara. Didn't acknowledge her directly. What would you like, Zara? Robert asked gently. Hot chocolate, please, Zara said quietly, her voice small. If that's okay. Sharon poured Robert's coffee with exaggerated care, then slammed a cup of hot chocolate onto Zara's tray table with just enough force that some of the liquid sloshed over the side, creating a small brown puddle. There you go, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that was really contempt wearing a mask. Try not to spill it all over the expensive seat, Blackie. The word again. Sharper this time, more deliberate, chosen specifically to wound. Several passengers nearby gasped. A woman across the aisle, a black woman in a sharp business suit who'd been watching the situation unfold since the first confrontation, stood up from her seat. Excuse me, she said, her voice calm but powerful, filled with authority. I'm Jessica Walsh, I'm an attorney, and I've now heard you use that slur twice. I want your name and employee number, and I'm documenting everything for a formal complaint. Sharon's face flushed red, her mask slipping entirely. I don't know what you think you heard, but... I heard exactly what you said, Jessica interrupted, her phone already out and recording. And so did everyone else in this section. You called this child a racial slur. Again. After being warned. After being told her seat was correct. You're targeting her and it's disgusting. Other passengers began speaking up, a chorus of voices that Sharon couldn't silence or dismiss. I heard it too. This is completely unacceptable. Someone needs to report her. That poor child. The murmurs grew louder, the disapproval palpable and spreading through the cabin like wildfire. Sharon's face went through several expressions, shock that she'd been called out so publicly, anger at these passengers for ganging up on her, fear as she realized this was spiraling out of her control. You're all misunderstanding the situation, she said, her voice rising, becoming shrill and defensive. I was simply... We all know what you were doing, Robert said, standing up now too, his full height and the authority of his posture making Sharon take a step back. You've been targeting this child since before takeoff. We've all witnessed it. And now you've compounded it by using that slur a second time. I don't care how long you've worked here or how many flights you've worked. This behavior is unacceptable. Michael appeared again, drawn by the commotion, his face lined with stress and disappointment. Sharon, I need you to come with me right now. These passengers are being disruptive. Sharon protested, but her voice wavered. They're interfering with my service duties and I think they need to be dealt with by the captain. Sharon. Now. Michael's voice was harder than anyone had heard it before. Not a request. A command. He led her toward the front of the plane, toward the cockpit area, while the entire first-class cabin watched in silence. Zara sat frozen in her seat, tears streaming down her face now, unchecked. She tried so hard to be brave, to not cry, to do what her mother said, but it was too much. The hot chocolate sat untouched on her tray table, the spilled liquid still spreading. Jessica Walsh moved to the empty seat beside Zara, sliding in without asking, knowing the child needed someone close. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly, pulling tissues from her purse and gently wiping Zara's tears. My name is Jessica. Can I sit with you for a little bit? Zara nodded, unable to speak, her whole body shaking with suppressed sobs. Jessica wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and that small gesture of kindness broke something open in Zara. She turned and buried her face against Jessica's shoulder, crying in earnest now, letting out all the fear and humiliation and pain she'd been holding back. I didn't do anything wrong, Zara sobbed. I just wanted to go see my grandma. I just wanted to sit in my seat and look out the window and draw my pictures. Why does she hate me? Why does she keep calling me that? Jessica's own eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back, trying to stay strong for this child. You didn't do anything wrong, baby. Not one single thing. Some people carry so much hate and bitterness in their hearts that it spills out onto everyone around them. Especially people who look like us. It's not fair, it's not right, and it's not your fault. Do you hear me? This is not your fault. I just want my mom, Zara whispered, her voice breaking. I want my mom so bad. I know, honey. I know. Do you have her phone number? Can we call her? Jessica pulled out her phone, ready to make the call herself if needed. She's in meetings all day, Zara said miserably, remembering what her mother had told her that morning. Important meetings she can't miss. She works really hard. I don't want to bother her. I don't want her to think I can't handle things by myself. Robert, who'd been standing nearby listening, spoke up. Zara, what's your mom's name? And trust me, she'll want to know about this. A mother always wants to know if her child needs her, no matter what meeting she's in. Dr. Amara Monroe, Zara said softly, pride mixing with her tears even in this terrible moment. She's really smart. She builds airplanes. Can you tell me her number? Robert asked gently. Or is it in your phone? With shaking hands, Zara pulled her phone from her backpack and found her mother's contact information. Robert took the phone, noting the number, and then used the airplane's satellite phone system, usually reserved for emergencies, and this absolutely qualified. He dialed the number, waiting through the connection delays that came with satellite communication. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail clicked on. Dr. Amara Monroe, CEO of Monroe Aviation Consulting. I'm unable to take your call right now, but please leave a detailed message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. The voice was warm, professional, confident. Robert could hear strength in it, intelligence, the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms. Dr. Monroe, my name is Robert Chen. I'm sitting with your daughter Zara on Sky United Airlines Flight 447 from Newark to Chicago. Before you panic, Zara is physically safe, but there's been a serious incident with one of the flight attendants. Your daughter has been subjected to repeated racial slurs and harassment. The flight attendant has called her. He paused, looking at Zara, not wanting to say the word in front of her again, has called her a deeply offensive name multiple times, deliberately spilled her drink, and has been openly hostile since before takeoff. Other passengers and I have witnessed everything. The situation is being handled by the flight crew now, but I wanted you to know immediately. Please call this number back. Zara really needs to hear your voice right now. Before he could hang up, the call waiting clicked. Robert's eyebrows rose. He switched over. Hello. This is Dr. Monroe. The voice was different now, stripped of pleasantness, hard as diamond. You just called about my daughter. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. Now. Robert felt a chill run down his spine at the tone. This was not a woman to be trifled with. This was not someone who would accept excuses or deflections. Dr. Monroe, I'm Robert Chen. I'm sitting next to Zara in first class. From the moment the flight attendant, a woman named Sharon Whitmore, saw your daughter, she's been targeting her. She tried to force Zara out of her first-class seat, claiming it was a mistake, even though Zara's boarding pass clearly showed 2A. When I and other passengers challenged her, she backed down but said she'd be watching Zara in a threatening manner. Go on. The voice was deceptively calm, but Robert could hear something underneath it. Rage, barely contained, like thunder rumbling in the distance before a storm. During beverage service, she deliberately spilled hot chocolate on Zara's tray. And she's used a racial slur, the word Blackie, at least twice that I've personally witnessed, possibly more. Multiple passengers have heard it. We're all documenting everything. An attorney on the flight is also preparing a formal complaint. The lead flight attendant has taken Sharon to see the captain, but honestly, Dr. Monroe, your daughter is traumatized. She's crying. She's scared. She needs you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Amara spoke again, her voice was different, still controlled but with an edge of steel that could cut through titanium. Put Zara on the phone, please. Of course. Robert handed the phone to Zara, whose tears were still flowing. It's your mom, sweetheart. Zara grabbed the phone like it was a lifeline. Mom? Her voice cracked on the word. Baby. Oh, my baby girl. Amara's voice shifted entirely now, all the hardness melting away, replaced by pure maternal love and concern. I'm here. I'm right here. Tell me what happened. Tell me everything. And Zara did. Through hiccuping sobs and stops and starts, she told her mother everything. Sharon's cold eyes when she first saw her. The way she'd been called Blackie, like it was her name. The hot chocolate spilling. The other passengers standing up for her. How scared she was. How she just wanted to come home, how she didn't want to fly anymore, how she felt so small and so wrong even though she knew she wasn't wrong, even though everyone kept telling her she didn't do anything wrong, she still felt like somehow this was her fault. Amara listened to every word, her own eyes filling with tears in her corner office. her heart breaking for her daughter while rage built in her chest like a nuclear reactor reaching critical mass. Zara, listen to me very carefully. Are you listening? Yes, Mom. Zara's voice was small but attentive. None of this is your fault. Not one bit of it. You did everything right. You showed your boarding pass. You were polite. You didn't start any confrontation. That woman, that flight attendant, she's the one who did wrong. She's the one who should be ashamed. Not you. Never you. Do you understand me? I think so. You are brilliant and beautiful and brave, and you belong in that first-class seat and anywhere else you choose to be. You remember who you are. Remember what I told you this morning. You're my daughter, and you have every right to take up space in this world. That woman doesn't get to make you feel less than what you are. Okay, Mom? Zara's crying had slowed, her mother's voice working its familiar magic, making the world feel a little less scary. Is that nice man Robert still there? Yes. Put him back on for just a second, then I'll talk to you more, okay? I promise we're going to talk as long as you need. Zara handed the phone back to Robert. She wants to talk to you again. Dr. Monroe? Robert said. Mr. Chen, thank you for protecting my daughter and for calling me. I need you to do something else for me if you're willing. Anything. I need you to keep that phone call active. Keep it on speaker if you can, quietly. I want to hear everything that happens for the rest of this flight. Can you do that? Absolutely. And Dr. Monroe? For what it's worth, your daughter is remarkable. The grace and dignity she's shown through this, you should be incredibly proud. I am, Amara said, her voice thick with emotion. I am. Now I have some calls to make. Some people are about to have a very bad day. And Mr. Chen? Make sure that flight attendant doesn't go anywhere near my daughter again. If she does, you call for the captain immediately. Understood. Robert put the phone on speaker at low volume and placed it discreetly on his tray table, keeping the line open. Jessica remained next to Zara, holding her hand, occasionally whispering words of comfort and strength. Other first-class passengers had formed a protective circle of sorts, everyone hyper-aware of Zara's presence, ready to intervene if Sharon reappeared. Meanwhile, in the cockpit area, Sharon stood before Captain Davis, a stern-faced man in his late 50s with 30 years of flying experience and exactly zero tolerance for the kind of behavior he'd just been briefed on. Michael stood to the side as a witness, his arms crossed, his usual friendly demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. Sharon, I've received multiple reports about your conduct toward the unaccompanied minor in Seat 2A, Captain Davis said, his voice clipped and formal. Multiple passengers have reported that you used racial slurs while addressing the child. Multiple times. They've reported that you attempted to remove her from her assigned seat without cause. They've reported hostile and discriminatory behavior. What do you have to say for yourself? Sharon's face was red, her hands fidgeting with her tablet, her mind racing to find the right explanation, the right defense, the magic words that would make this go away like all the other complaints had gone away before. Captain, those passengers are exaggerating wildly. I would never use that kind of language. I was simply trying to verify that there hadn't been a seating error in the computer system. You know how the system can glitch sometimes. I was doing my job, ensuring that first-class passengers have the appropriate experience they paid for. Don't, Captain Davis said sharply, holding up a hand. Don't insult my intelligence with corporate speak and excuses. Michael heard you use the slur himself. You called that child Blackie, in front of him and multiple witnesses. Are you calling your fellow crew member a liar? Sharon's eyes darted to Michael, looking for support, finding none. There must be a misunderstanding. I may have said something that was misinterpreted. There's no misinterpretation of that particular word, Sharon. And this isn't your first complaint. I pulled your file. 12 previous incidents of reported discriminatory behavior toward passengers. Well, all filed, all supposedly investigated, all dismissed with warnings. But this time there are multiple witnesses. This time there's an attorney on board who's documenting everything. This time you chose to target a child. Sharon's world was starting to crumble, but she clung to the belief that had sustained her through every previous complaint, every previous warning. I want my union representative. I have rights. I have seniority. You can't just. I can and I am, Captain Davis interrupted, his voice hard as iron. You are suspended from all duties for the remainder of this flight, effective immediately. You will report to the galley. You will have no interaction with passengers. 0. You will not serve, you will not walk through the cabin, you will not do anything except stay out of sight. When we land, you will be met by company security and HR. Do you understand? This is outrageous. Sharon's voice rose, becoming shrill with panic and indignation. I've been with this airline for 15 years. 15 years. You can't treat me like this because some little, she caught herself, seeing the warning in Captain Davis's eyes. Because some passengers are overly sensitive. 15 years means you should know better. It means you've had 15 years to learn how to treat people with dignity and respect. Clearly you chose not to learn that lesson. Now go to the galley and stay there. If I hear of you approaching that child or any passenger for the rest of this flight, I will have you restrained. Am I absolutely clear? Sharon's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Her face was the color of a ripe tomato, humiliation and rage warring across her features. Finally, she turned and stalked toward the galley, her whole body rigid with fury, muttering under her breath about lawsuits and discrimination and how this was all so unfair. Michael watched her go, then turned to the captain. I should have reported her sooner. I've heard things over the years, complaints from other crew members about the way she talks. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought maybe it was just personality conflicts. It's not your fault, Captain Davis said, though his voice was heavy. But yes, moving forward we all need to speak up faster. That child down there is traumatized. That's on all of us for letting Sharon's behavior slide for so long. He picked up the internal phone. Get me Sky United ground operations in Chicago. And get me our corporate HR department. Now. In her corner office overlooking the city, Amara Monroe stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, her phone pressed to her ear, listening to Robert's open line, hearing the ambient sounds of the airplane cabin, the voices of passengers, her daughter's occasional sniffles. Her other hand was clenched so tightly her nails were digging into her palm, leaving little crescent-shaped marks. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were hard. And she was making calls. The first call was to her head of human resources, Patricia Wong, a woman she'd personally recruited 5 years ago specifically because of her no-nonsense approach to workplace discrimination and her fierce commitment to accountability. Patricia, I need you in my office immediately, Amara said, her voice clipped and controlled. 3 minutes later, Patricia rushed in, sensing from her boss's tone that this was urgent. Ma'am, what's wrong? My daughter is on Sky United Flight 447 from Newark to Chicago. One of our flight attendants has been subjecting her to racial harassment for the past 2 hours. I need you to pull every file we have on Sharon Whitmore, employee number. She paused, texting Robert to get the information from Sharon's name tag. The response came back in seconds. Employee number 47832. I want her complete employment history on my desk in the next 5 minutes. Patricia's face went pale. Your daughter? Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'll pull everything right now. She practically ran from the office. Amara paced her office like a caged lioness, listening to the open phone line, hearing Jessica comforting Zara, hearing Robert's occasional reassuring words. Her daughter. Her baby girl. Her brilliant, beautiful, brave baby girl who loved airplanes and dreamed of designing them one day, who'd been so excited about this trip, about flying alone like a big girl. And some bitter, hateful woman had turned it into a nightmare. Had made her cry. Had made her feel small and wrong and unwelcome in a space where she had every right to be. Patricia returned, slightly out of breath, with a tablet full of files. Here. Everything on Sharon Whitmore. Amara took the tablet and began scrolling, her eyes moving faster and faster, her expression darkening with each screen. Hired 15 years ago. Adequate performance reviews, nothing exceptional. But buried in the file, 12 formal complaints from passengers over a 10-year period. Complaints about rude behavior toward families with children. Complaints about differential treatment of minority passengers. One particularly damning complaint from 2 years ago about refusing to serve a Muslim woman in a hijab. All of them investigated. All of them resolved with verbal warnings and notes in her file. All of them signed off by the same regional manager, Mark Stevens. Who the hell is Mark Stevens and why is he still employed? Amara's voice was dangerously quiet. Regional manager for East Coast operations, Patricia said. He's been with the company for 12 years. He handles HR issues for about 300 flight crew employees. Not anymore, he doesn't. Get him on the phone. Right now. Patricia made the call, and moments later, Mark Stevens's voice came through on speaker, jovial and unsuspecting. Patricia, what can I do for you today? Mr. Stevens, I have Dr. Monroe on the line with a question about one of your flight attendants. The joviality dropped several degrees. Being on a call with the CEO was never routine. Of course. Happy to help. Which employee? Amara cut in, her voice cold as Arctic ice. Sharon Whitmore. Employee number 47832. Can you explain to me why she has 12 formal complaints for discriminatory behavior in her file, and why she's still employed? Stevens cleared his throat nervously. Well, Dr. Monroe, I can assure you that all of those complaints were thoroughly investigated according to our protocols. Sharon has been with us for many years and has seniority. We found that most of those complaints were, well, they were matters of interpretation. You know how passengers can be sometimes, especially in this political climate? People are very sensitive nowadays. Sharon comes from a different generation, and sometimes her manner of speaking can be misunderstood. Stop, Amara said, her voice cutting through his explanation like a blade. Stop talking right now. I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Stevens, and I want you to listen very carefully. Sharon Whitmore is currently on one of our flights. She has spent the past 2 hours verbally harassing an 8-year-old unaccompanied minor. She has called this child a racial slur multiple times in front of witnesses. She attempted to force this child out of her assigned first-class seat. She has created a hostile, traumatic environment for a passenger who cannot escape, who cannot defend herself, who is vulnerable and alone. That's very concerning, Dr. Monroe. I assure you I'll look into it immediately, Anne. I'm not finished. That 8-year-old child is my daughter. Silence on the other end of the line. Complete, total silence. And you, Mr. Stevens, are the man who investigated 12 previous complaints against this woman and decided that her behavior was acceptable. That her discrimination was just a matter of interpretation and generational differences. You are the man who enabled her to continue terrorizing passengers for years because dealing with her properly would have been inconvenient. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Are you proud of the work you've done protecting Sharon Whitmore? Stevens's voice, when it came, was shaking. Dr. Monroe, I followed company protocols. I documented everything. The union has very specific requirements for discipline, and without solid evidence. We have solid evidence now. We have multiple witnesses, including other crew members. We have an attorney on that flight documenting everything. We have passengers who are prepared to testify. And we're going to find out very quickly whether we have evidence in all those previous cases that you chose to ignore. You're suspended, Mr. Stevens. Effective immediately. Pending a full investigation into how you've handled discrimination complaints. Patricia will inform you of next steps. Don't call me. Don't email me. Wait for official contact from HR. You can't just, my contract, this is. Amara disconnected the call. She looked at Patricia, who was pale but nodding with grim determination. I want a complete audit of every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years. Every single one. I want to know who investigated them, how they were resolved, and whether there are patterns we've been missing. I want it to be thorough, and I want it to hurt if people have been doing what Stevens was doing. Absolutely. I'll assemble a team today. And Patricia? I want video footage from Sharon Whitmore's flights for the past year. Every flight she's worked. I want to see if there are incidents we don't even know about because passengers didn't bother to complain. We can access archived cabin camera footage. It'll take some time to compile, but we can do it. Do it. And I want every passenger who filed a complaint about Sharon contacted personally. Apologized to personally. I want them to know we failed them, and I want to know if they're willing to provide additional statements. Patricia nodded, making notes on her tablet. What about Sharon herself? She's being suspended on the plane as we speak. When the flight lands, I want her met by security. I want her escorted off the aircraft. I want her airline credentials seized. And I want her formally terminated before she leaves the airport. No paid leave. No investigation period. She's done. The union will fight it. Let them. We have multiple witnesses. We have her own crew members testifying against her. We have video evidence I'm sure we can find if we look. And we have the fact that she terrorized a child, my child, for hours. Let them try to defend that. I'll see them in court if necessary and I will win. Patricia had never seen Amara this cold, this focused, this absolutely certain. In 5 years of working together, she'd seen her boss as brilliant, strategic, sometimes fierce in negotiations, but this was different. This was personal. This was a mother protecting her child and making sure it could never happen to anyone else's child again. There's one more thing, Amara said, pulling up more files on her computer. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow. I'm done with having these conversations reactively. We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination across the entire airline. New training programs. Independent oversight for complaints. Transparent enforcement. And anyone in management who's been sweeping this kind of behavior under the rug is going to answer for it. That's going to be a massive overhaul. I don't care. I built this airline to connect people, to bring them together, to make travel accessible and comfortable and safe. Not to traumatize children. Not to give racists a platform. If we can't get this right, if we can't treat every single passenger with dignity regardless of who they are or what they look like, then we don't deserve to be in business. Patricia nodded slowly. I'll start preparing materials for the board meeting. Good. Now I have to go. I have a flight to catch. Ma'am? My daughter needs me. She's landing in Chicago in about 3 hours. I'm going to be there when she gets off that plane. Amara was already grabbing her coat, her purse, texting her assistant to arrange for the company jet to be ready immediately. You handle things here. I trust you completely. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Back on the plane, the atmosphere in first class had shifted. Word had spread through the cabin about what Sharon had done, and passengers who hadn't witnessed the initial confrontations were now aware, angry on Zara's behalf, protective of this brave little girl who'd been mistreated. The galley area at the back of first class had become Sharon's prison. She sat on the small jump seat, arms crossed, face red, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had seniority. She had the union. She'd survived 12 previous complaints. This should have blown over like all the others. But it wasn't blowing over. She could hear the passengers talking, could feel their judgment, could sense that this time was different. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, kept buzzing with text messages, but she was too afraid to look at them. Probably the union rep responding to her earlier texts. Probably telling her what she already knew deep down. This time she'd gone too far. Karen, another flight attendant who'd been friends with Sharon for years, approached the galley cautiously. Sharon, I have to ask. Did you really call that little girl what people are saying you called her? They're all lying, Sharon said automatically, but her voice was weak, unconvincing even to her own ears. They're ganging up on me because they're woke and oversensitive and they want to destroy someone like me who tells it like it is. Sharon, I've known you for 8 years. I've heard you say things. I've ignored them because I didn't want to cause problems, but I've heard you. And I'm asking you now, as someone who considered you a friend, did you call that child a racial slur? Sharon looked up at Karen, and for a moment, something like honesty flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by defiance and self-righteousness. So what if I did? She didn't belong in first class. Her kind never does. They get one upgrade and suddenly they think they're better than everyone else. Someone needed to teach her some humility. Karen stepped back like Sharon had slapped her. Oh my God. You actually believe that? You actually think, Sharon, that's a child? An 8-year-old child. A child who needed to learn her place. There's something seriously wrong with you. Karen turned and walked away, her hands shaking, feeling sick to her stomach that she'd been friends with someone capable of such cruelty. Sharon sat alone in the galley, her isolation complete now, even her few allies abandoning her. She pulled out her phone and finally looked at her messages. The union rep had sent a long text explaining that while they provide basic representation, cases involving racial discrimination against minors were nearly impossible to defend, especially with multiple witnesses. They'd do what they could, but Sharon should prepare herself for termination and possible legal action. Her ex-husband had somehow already heard about the incident, probably through social media, the videos were probably already circulating, and had sent a brief message, I'm not surprised. You've always been this way. I'm glad our kids don't have to grow up seeing your example anymore. Even her own children were being referenced as casualties of her hatred. The weight of it all started to crash down on Sharon. This was really happening. She was really going to lose everything. Her job, her reputation, her income, her ability to work in aviation ever again. All because of one little girl who'd had the audacity to sit in first class. No, not because of the girl, a small voice in Sharon's head whispered. Because of you. Because of choices you made. Words you chose to say. Hate you chose to carry and spread. But Sharon wasn't ready to face that truth yet. Maybe she'd never be ready. In seat 2A, Zara had finally stopped crying. She sat between Robert and Jessica, both of them providing a buffer of safety and support. The hot chocolate that Sharon had spilled had been cleaned up and replaced by Michael, who'd brought Zara warm cookies and orange juice and apologized at least a dozen times even though none of this was his fault. Do you like to draw? Jessica asked, seeing Zara's notebook still open on the tray table. Zara nodded. I like drawing airplanes. I want to design them when I grow up. My mom says I have a good eye for aerodynamics. Can I see? Zara showed Jessica her notebook, filled with page after page of airplane sketches. Some were simple side views. Others were intricate technical drawings that showed remarkable understanding for an 8-year-old. One page showed a futuristic plane with wings that looked like a bird in flight. "These are incredible," Jessica said genuinely. "You have real talent, Zara. Your mom's right about the aerodynamics. Look at these wing angles. Did anyone teach you this or did you figure it out yourself?" "I read a lot of books about planes," Zara said quietly, a small smile appearing for the first time since the ordeal began. "And my mom explains things to me. She's really smart about how planes work." "Your mom sounds amazing. What does she do?" "She's a doctor. Well, not the kind that helps sick people. She has a PhD in aerospace engineering. She builds and designs airplane parts and helps airlines figure out how to make their planes better." Robert and Jessica exchanged a glance. A PhD in aerospace engineering. Not just any concerned parent, but someone who deeply understood the industry, someone who likely had connections, someone who would know exactly what to do with this situation. "Does your mom work with a lot of airlines?" Robert asked carefully. "Yeah, lots of them. She has a consulting company. She travels all over the world. That's why I don't get to see her as much as I want sometimes, but when she's home, we do special things together. Like she took me to an aviation museum last month and we spent the whole day there looking at old planes." The phone on Robert's tray table, still on speaker at low volume, carried Amara's voice suddenly. "Baby, I'm still here. I'm listening. I'm on my way to you right now." Zara picked up the phone. "You're coming to Grandma's house?" "I'm coming to Chicago. I'll be there when you land. I'm not letting you walk off that plane without me being there, okay? I'm on our company plane right now. We took off 10 minutes ago. I'll beat your commercial flight by about 30 minutes. You have a company plane?" Amara laughed softly, a sound warm with love. "Baby, there's a lot about what mommy does that we haven't talked about yet because you're still young. But yes, I have a plane. And I'm using it to come get you because you need me. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world. Now, are those nice people still with you? Mr. Chen and Ms. Walsh? They're right here. They've been so nice to me." "Good. You stay with them. And Zara? When we land, there are going to be some people there to meet the plane. Security and some other folks. It might seem scary, but I promise you you're not in any trouble. They're there to help." "Okay. Okay, Mom. I'll see you so soon, baby girl." So soon. The last 2 hours of the flight passed with agonizing slowness for some and surprising speed for others. Sharon remained isolated in the galley, her mind spinning through impossible scenarios where this somehow worked out, where she kept her job, where her life didn't fall apart completely. But with each passing minute, the reality became harder to deny. Zara, surrounded by her protective circle of passengers, slowly relaxed. Jessica told her stories about being a lawyer, about fighting for people who'd been treated unfairly. Robert told her about growing up as one of the only Asian kids in his small town, about facing his own discrimination, about how he'd learned to stand up for himself and others. Other passengers stopped by to offer words of encouragement, to tell Zara she was brave, to slip her their business cards and tell her to have her mother call if there was anything they could do to help. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into Chicago. We should be on the ground in about 20 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." Michael and the other crew members moved through the cabin, collecting trash, ensuring seats were upright and tray tables stowed. Sharon sat in the galley, her hands gripping the armrests of the jump seat, her knuckles white. 20 minutes until her life ended. That's what it felt like. 20 minutes until consequences she'd avoided for 15 years finally caught up with her. The plane descended through clouds, the Chicago skyline appearing in the windows, Lake Michigan sparkling in the late afternoon sun. Zara pressed her face to the window, watching the ground get closer, her anxiety returning as she thought about what came next. But her mother would be there. Her mother was coming. That made everything bearable. The wheels touched down with a gentle bump. The engines roared in reverse thrust, slowing the massive aircraft. Passengers applauded, something that always happened on this route for some reason. The plane taxied toward the gate, and Captain Davis's voice came over the intercom one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've reached the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off. For passenger Zara Monroe and flight attendant Sharon Whitmore, please wait for further instructions. All other passengers, thank you for flying with us today." The specificity of that announcement sent murmurs through the cabin. Sharon felt like she might be sick. This was really happening. They were really calling her out by name over the intercom. The plane pulled up to the gate, the jetway extending to connect with the door. But the door didn't open immediately. Everyone waited, tension building. Through the small windows, Sharon could see unusual activity on the jetway. More people than normal. Security uniforms. Business suits. Finally the door opened. A woman in a crisp business suit stepped onto the plane, Patricia Wong, though Sharon didn't know that yet. Behind her were 2 airport security officers and a man from the airline's security division. Sharon Whitmore? Patricia said, her voice professional but cold. Sharon stood on shaking legs. That's me. I'm Patricia Wong, Vice President of Human Resources for Sky United Airlines. I need you to come with us, please. Am I being arrested? Sharon's voice came out as a squeak. No, but we need to speak with you immediately regarding multiple serious complaints about your conduct on this flight. Please gather your belongings and come with us now. Sharon looked around hoping for, what? Support? Sympathy? She found none. The passengers watched her with expressions ranging from anger to disgust to pity. Karen wouldn't meet her eyes. Michael looked disappointed. Sharon grabbed her bag and walked toward the door, her sensible shoes suddenly feeling like they were made of lead. As she passed Robert's row, she made the mistake of looking at Zara. The little girl was watching her, no longer crying, no longer looking afraid. Just sad. Sad for Sharon, in a way that was more devastating than anger could have been. Sharon opened her mouth to say something, an apology maybe, or another excuse or some final cruelty, but no words came. What could she possibly say that would matter now? She turned away and followed Patricia off the plane. As soon as Sharon was gone, the atmosphere in the cabin transformed. Passengers began standing, stretching, gathering their belongings. But many of them waited, watching seat 2A, waiting to see what would happen to the brave little girl who'd endured so much. Patricia returned, her expression completely different now, warm, compassionate, deeply apologetic. She approached Zara and knelt down beside her seat, putting herself at eye level with the child. Zara? My name is Patricia. I work with your mom at Sky United Airlines. I'm so sorry for what happened to you today. This is not who we are, this is not what our airline stands for, and I promise you that we're going to make sure it never happens to anyone else ever again. Zara nodded, unsure what to say. Your mom asked me to give you this. Patricia handed Zara an envelope, sealed with a little heart drawn on it in marker. Zara opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note on her mother's personal stationery, and Zara would have recognized that handwriting anywhere, elegant, strong, distinctive. My brave, beautiful girl. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are. You are smart, you are kind, and you belong everywhere you choose to be. I'm waiting for you just outside. I love you more than all the stars in the sky and all the planes in the air. Love, Mom. Also in the envelope were vouchers. Flight vouchers for Zara's grandmother, premium class tickets for a year. And a small note saying that Sky United would be making a donation to a charity of Zara's choosing. And at the bottom, a sketch that made Zara gasp. A drawing of an airplane with Zara Monroe, future CEO written on the side. Tears filled Zara's eyes again, but these were different tears. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Her mom was here. Her mom had fixed things. Her mom had made everything okay somehow. Can I go see my mom now? Zara asked. Absolutely. I'll walk you out myself. Mr. Chen, Ms. Walsh, would you like to accompany us? Robert and Jessica stood immediately. We wouldn't miss it, Robert said. They gathered Zara's belongings, her backpack, her stuffed elephant, her notebook. As they moved toward the exit, something unexpected happened. The passengers in first class began to applaud. Then the applause spread to business class, to economy, people standing and clapping, some whistling, some calling out words of support. You're so brave, sweetie. You're a hero. Don't ever let anyone dim your light. Zara's face flushed, overwhelmed by the attention but also strengthened by it. These strangers, these people she'd never met before and would probably never see again, they saw her. They valued her. They believed she mattered. Patricia led them off the plane, through the jetway, into the terminal. And there, waiting just past the gate area, was Amara Monroe. She was tall, elegant, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the way her face lit up when she saw Zara, the way she immediately dropped to her knees and opened her arms. Mommy. Zara broke into a run, her backpack bouncing, her stuffed elephant flying. She crashed into her mother's arms with the full force of an 8-year-old who'd been through hell and finally reached safety. Amara held her daughter tight, so tight, rocking her back and forth, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling her small body shaking with sobs of relief. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I've got you. You're safe. You're okay. I've got you." They stayed like that for several minutes, mother and daughter, the world fading away around them. Passengers from the flight walked past, some pausing to smile, some wiping their own tears. Patricia stood at a respectful distance, giving them space but remaining available. Finally, Amara pulled back slightly, cupping Zara's face in her hands, using her thumbs to wipe away tears. "Look at me. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt," Zara said. "Just, she was so mean, Mom. I didn't do anything wrong and she was so mean." I know, baby. And she's never going to be mean to anyone ever again. I promise you that." Robert and Jessica had hung back, not wanting to intrude on the reunion, but Amara stood, still holding Zara's hand, and approached them. "You must be Robert Chen and Jessica Walsh," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you for protecting my daughter when I couldn't be there. Thank you for standing up for her. Thank you for calling me. I can never repay that kindness." "Ms. Monroe," Robert started. "Doctor, actually," Amara said with a slight smile. "But please call me Amara. Amara, your daughter is remarkable. What she went through today would have broken many adults. But she handled it with such grace and dignity. You've raised an incredible human being." "She gets that from her grandmother," Amara said, squeezing Zara's hand. "And from every ancestor who survived worse than this and kept going anyway." Jessica stepped forward, pulling out her phone. "Dr. Monroe, I'm an attorney. I've documented everything that happened on that flight. Video, audio, witness statements. I'd like to offer my services pro bono if you want to pursue any legal action, either against the airline or against Sharon Whitmore personally." Amara's expression was complicated, grateful but also knowing. "I appreciate that more than you know. But I should tell you something that might change your perspective. I'm not just a concerned parent. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder of Sky United Airlines." The silence that followed was profound. Robert and Jessica's eyes went wide with shock. You own the airline?" Robert said slowly. "I do. Well, I own controlling interest, which means Sharon Whitmore didn't just harass a random child. She harassed her employer's daughter on her employer's aircraft. And she had no idea." Jessica laughed, a sound of pure, delighted justice. Oh my God, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Karma works fast sometimes," Amara said with a grim smile. "Sharon Whitmore's employment was terminated approximately 15 minutes ago. She's currently being escorted from the airport property. Her credentials have been revoked. She will never work in aviation again if I have anything to say about it, and I have a lot to say about it. The regional manager who ignored 12 previous complaints about her has also been suspended. We're conducting a full audit of every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years. And I'm implementing sweeping changes across the entire airline to make sure this never, ever happens again." That's more than I could have hoped for," Jessica said. "Most companies would have just given her a slap on the wrist and shuffled her to a different route. Most companies aren't run by mothers who just heard their daughter crying on a phone for 2 hours." Amara's voice was hard now, that steel returning. "And most companies aren't run by black women who know exactly what that little girl went through because we've all been through versions of it ourselves. This isn't just about my daughter. This is about every child, every passenger, every human being who deserves to travel without being subjected to hatred and discrimination." She pulled out her own phone, quickly typing something, then looked back at Robert and Jessica. "I'd still like to thank you both properly. Please, give your contact information to Patricia. I'd like to send you something and I'd like to stay in touch. People like you who stand up when it would be easier to look away, you're what makes the world better." Patricia stepped forward with her tablet, collecting their information. Amara's grandmother appeared then, having been waiting near baggage claim, and there was another reunion, more tears, more hugs. The grandmother held Zara like she'd never let go, whispering prayers of thanksgiving. As the small group moved toward baggage claim, toward whatever came next, Sharon Whitmore sat in a small airport security office, her airline credentials in a plastic bag on the table in front of her, her future in ruins, facing Patricia Wong and an airline attorney who were explaining in very clear terms that her employment was terminated effective immediately. "You can't do this," Sharon kept saying like a mantra, like if she said it enough times it would become true. "I have union protection. I have rights. You have to do an investigation first." "We did an investigation," Patricia said coldly. "It took approximately 45 minutes. We have statements from multiple passengers. We have statements from crew members, including your colleague Michael Santos, who personally witnessed you using racial slurs. We have video footage from cabin cameras that captured at least one instance clearly. We have the testimony of an attorney who was on the flight. And we have the fact that the child you terrorized is the daughter of our CEO. Your employment is terminated. Your credentials are revoked. You will be escorted from the premises. This is because of who her mother is, Sharon said desperately. You're only doing this because. We're doing this because you racially harassed a child, the attorney interrupted. Who her mother is doesn't change what you did. It just changes how quickly you're being held accountable. If you'd done this to any other child, the outcome would eventually be the same. You just wouldn't have had the entire weight of corporate leadership coming down on you within hours. Sharon looked at the bag containing her credentials, the badge she'd worn for 15 years, and something finally broke inside her. Not remorse, not yet, but the realization that this was really over. Her career was gone. Her income was gone. Her identity as a flight attendant, the only professional identity she'd had for 15 years, was gone. What do I do now? She whispered. That's not our concern, Patricia said, standing. Security will escort you out. You'll receive final paperwork about your termination via certified mail within 3 business days. Do not attempt to return to any Sky United property. Do not attempt to contact any Sky United employees. Your union representative has been notified. If you have any questions, direct them to your union, not to us. Sharon was led out of the office, through the airport, past gates she'd worked 1,000 times, past colleagues who stared and whispered, past passengers who would never know her name or care about her story. She was walked to the employee exit, handed her belongings from her locker, and escorted to the parking garage where her 10-year-old Honda waited like a monument to all her failures. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, unable to turn the key, unable to drive away, unable to process what had just happened. Her phone was full of messages now, texts from other flight attendants who'd heard what happened, some sympathetic but most condemning. Posts on social media were already circulating with her name, her face, the story spreading like wildfire. Videos from passengers were being shared, reshared, going viral. Her life as she knew it was over. Meanwhile, in the airport terminal, Zara held her mother's hand on one side and her grandmother's hand on the other, walking toward the exit, toward whatever came next. News crews had somehow already gotten wind of the story, probably from passengers who'd immediately posted about it, and were waiting outside. Amara saw them and made a decision. She could go out the private exit, avoid them entirely, protect Zara from more attention. Or she could face them, control the narrative, make sure the story was told correctly. She knelt down in front of Zara. Baby, there are news cameras outside. Reporters who want to talk about what happened. We don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. We can go out a different way. It's completely up to you. Zara thought about it, her face serious. If we talk to them, will it help make sure it doesn't happen to other kids? It might, yes. Then we should talk to them. Amara smiled, pride shining in her eyes. That's my brave girl. They walked outside together, and immediately the questions started, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Dr. Monroe, can you tell us what happened? Is it true your daughter was racially harassed on your own airline? What actions are you taking against the employee? Amara raised one hand and the crowd quieted. When she spoke, her voice was clear, strong, and absolutely certain. My daughter, Zara Monroe, was subjected to repeated racial harassment by a Sky United flight attendant during a flight this afternoon. She was called racial slurs multiple times. She was targeted because of the color of her skin. She was made to feel unwelcome and unsafe in a space where she had every right to be. The employee responsible has been terminated. But this isn't just about one employee. This is about a culture that allowed 12 previous complaints against this individual to be dismissed or minimized. That changes today. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. I'm implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination across Sky United Airlines. We're conducting a complete audit of our complaint procedures. We're creating independent oversight for discrimination reports. We're mandating new training for all employees at every level. And we're holding leadership accountable for creating and maintaining a culture of dignity and respect. Because what happened to my daughter happens to countless people every day in countless places. And those of us with the power to change it have an obligation to do so. Dr. Monroe, some might say you're only taking action because it was your daughter? You're right, Amara interrupted. I am taking action because it was my daughter. Because I heard her crying on the phone, afraid and alone, subjected to hatred she didn't deserve and couldn't escape. But I'm also taking action because it could be anyone's daughter, anyone's son, anyone's mother or father or grandparent. This isn't about protecting just my child. This is about protecting everyone's children. She squeezed Zara's hand. My daughter wanted to speak to you actually. She has something to say. Zara stepped forward, her voice small but steady, amplified by the microphones. That lady was really mean to me. She said bad words and made me cry. But a lot of people helped me. The man sitting next to me and a nice lawyer lady and other passengers. They stood up for me even though they didn't know me. And I want other kids to know that if something bad happens to you, there are good people who will help. And you should tell grown-ups who can fix things. Don't keep it secret. Tell someone. The cameras captured it all. This 8-year-old child, brave beyond her years, turning her trauma into a message of hope and empowerment. It would be the clip played on every news station, shared across every social media platform, seen by millions. Amara could have said more. She could have talked about the lawsuits she was prepared to file, the investigation she was launching, the heads that were going to roll. But instead she simply said, "Thank you. We won't be taking any more questions today. My daughter needs rest and we need family time." They walked to Amara's waiting car, a driver holding the door open. As they drove away from the airport, Zara sat between her mother and grandmother in the back seat, finally safe, finally protected, finally able to just be a little girl again. "Mom?" Zara said quietly. "Yes, baby? I'm glad you're the boss of the airline." Amara laughed, a real laugh, the first genuine laugh since receiving Robert's phone call. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The story didn't end there though. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the incident became a national conversation about discrimination in travel, about the treatment of children, about accountability in corporate America. The videos from passengers went viral, viewed millions of times. #Justice for Zara trended on social media. People shared their own stories of discrimination while traveling, a flood of testimonies that made it impossible to dismiss this as an isolated incident. Sharon Whitmore tried to tell her side of the story, reaching out to conservative media outlets that might frame her as a victim of cancel culture, but it backfired spectacularly. When interviewed, she couldn't quite manage to sound genuinely sorry, her apologies always qualified with excuses and complaints about how unfair it all was. The audio recordings from the flight were released, with passenger permission, and hearing her actually say those words to a child, hearing the coldness in her voice, destroyed any sympathy anyone might have had. She became a cautionary tale, an example of what happens when hatred meets accountability. She applied for jobs in retail and customer service, anywhere she could think of, but the viral videos followed her. HR departments would recognize her name, Google her, find the story, and suddenly the position would be filled. She ended up working at a call center for minimum wage, a job where she never saw customers face to face, where she could be monitored and controlled, where her prejudices couldn't hurt anyone. Robert Chen kept his promise. He filed a detailed formal complaint and stayed in touch with Zara's family. His company ended up partnering with Sky United on diversity initiatives. He became friends with Amara, occasionally meeting for coffee, talking about business and justice and the responsibility of people in power to use it well. Jessica Walsh started her nonprofit, Travel While Black, with a significant donation from Amara and support from Sky United. The organization provided resources for dealing with discrimination while traveling, offered legal support for victims, and partnered with airlines and hotels to improve training and accountability. Within 6 months, they'd helped over 200 cases, some resulting in policy changes, some in legal settlements, all of them making a difference. Mark Stevens, the regional manager who dismissed all those complaints, found his career in aviation over as well. The audit revealed he'd been systematically minimizing discrimination complaints to keep his performance metrics high. Fewer complaints meant better numbers for his region. He'd sacrificed passenger safety and dignity for his own advancement. He was terminated and faced difficulty finding equivalent work. Amara Monroe became something of a corporate icon, profiled in business magazines not just for her success in aviation but for her approach to accountability and culture change. The board meeting she called turned into a watershed moment for Sky United. She presented data showing that discrimination complaints cost the airline not just in legal fees and settlements, but in lost customers, damaged reputation, and decreased employee morale. The business case for zero tolerance was overwhelming. The new policies she implemented became industry-leading. Independent oversight committees. Mandatory reporting of all discrimination complaints to the CEO's office. Transparent tracking of complaint outcomes. Quarterly public reports on diversity metrics. The airline's customer satisfaction scores actually increased after the changes, proving that doing the right thing could also be good business. But the most important changes were smaller, more personal. Flight attendants reported feeling empowered to call out discriminatory behavior in real time, knowing they'd be supported. Passengers from marginalized communities reported feeling safer, more welcome. Children like Zara could travel without fear. 6 months after the incident, Amara and Zara were invited to speak at an aviation industry conference about discrimination and accountability. Zara, now confident and poised in a way that broke Amara's heart with pride, stood at a podium in front of hundreds of airline executives and told her story. "I was really scared that day," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I thought I did something wrong just by being who I am. But I learned something important. I learned that there are more good people than bad people. I learned that standing up to bullies matters even when it's scary. I learned that my mom was right when she told me I belong everywhere I choose to be." She paused, looking out at the audience. "And I learned that when something bad happens, you can choose to use it to make things better. That lady who was mean to me? She probably doesn't work anywhere now where she can hurt people. The man who let her be mean for years? He lost his job too. And now airlines have new rules to protect kids like me. So something good came from something bad." The standing ovation lasted for 3 full minutes. Zara kept drawing her airplanes, her sketches getting more sophisticated as she grew older. She joined a youth aerospace program that Amara helped fund. She started talking about maybe going to MIT like her mom, maybe getting her own PhD, maybe designing the next generation of aircraft. 1 year after the incident, on the anniversary of that horrible flight, Amara did something special. She arranged for Zara to take a flight from Newark to Chicago on Sky United Airlines, in first class, seat 2A. The same exact route, the same exact seat. "Are you sure you want to do this, baby?" Amara asked the night before. "We don't have to. We can drive. We can take a different airline. We can." "I want to," Zara interrupted. "I want to show myself that I'm not scared anymore. That what happened doesn't get to control me." So they flew. Amara sat beside her this time, not letting her daughter face this alone. The flight crew had been briefed, not about what happened, just that this was a special flight for a special passenger. They treated Zara like royalty but also like a person, striking that perfect balance between attentive service and genuine respect. When they landed in Chicago, Zara looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. "I did it. I took the same flight and it was okay. Nothing bad happened." "I'm so proud of you," Amara whispered. "So incredibly proud." "Mom? That lady's Sharon. Do you think she learned anything? Do you think she's sorry?" Amara considered the question carefully. "I don't know, baby. I hope so. I hope she's using this time to think about why she carried so much hate, where it came from, what it cost her. I hope she's getting help. But whether she does or doesn't, whether she learns or refuses to learn, that's on her. You did your part. You survived. You healed. You turned something terrible into something meaningful. That's all you can control. Do you think she ever thinks about me? Probably. I think you'll be the one that got away from her, the one she can't explain away or forget. And maybe that's important. Maybe that's what finally makes her look in the mirror and see what she's become." Sharon Whitmore did think about Zara. Constantly. In her tiny apartment, working her call center job, watching the world move on without her, she thought about the little girl she'd tormented. At first, her thoughts were bitter, blaming Zara, blaming her mother, blaming everyone but herself. But slowly, painfully, as months passed and the consequences of her actions became impossible to deny, something began to shift. She started therapy, court-mandated as part of a discrimination lawsuit settlement. The therapist, a patient black woman who somehow didn't give up on Sharon even when she probably should have, helped her begin to unpack the hatred she'd carried for so long. "Where did you learn that black people don't belong in first class?" the therapist asked one session. Sharon opened her mouth to deny she'd ever thought that, but stopped herself. "My father," she said quietly. "He used to say things like that. About how there's a natural order to society and everyone has their place and chaos happens when people forget where they belong. And you never questioned it?" "I never thought I needed to. It was just how things were." How things were for whom? That question broke something open in Sharon. How things were for her. For people like her. People who'd been taught that their worth was measured by keeping other people down, that their place in the hierarchy was secured by ensuring others stayed below them. And when the world started changing, when those hierarchies started crumbling, she'd clung to them harder, lashing out at anyone who challenged her worldview. She wrote a letter of apology to Zara, though her lawyer advised against it, though she knew it would probably never be read. She wrote it anyway, crying as she tried to find words adequate to the harm she'd caused. "I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I made you cry. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't belong when you belonged more than I did. I'm sorry I was so full of hate that I aimed it at a child who did nothing wrong except exist in a space I thought should be mine alone. I'm working on becoming a better person. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'm trying. You deserved better. Every child deserves better." She never sent it. She kept it in a drawer, reading it sometimes when she needed to remember what her hatred had cost, what it had taken from an innocent child, what it had stolen from her own soul. The letter was found years later, after Sharon died, a lonely death in that same small apartment, estranged from her children, without friends or community, the natural consequence of a lifetime of pushing people away. Her daughter found the letter while cleaning out the apartment and sent it to Amara Monroe, not knowing if it would be wanted but feeling like it should be delivered. Amara read it once, then tucked it away. She never showed it to Zara. Some wounds didn't need reopening. Some apologies came too late. Zara had healed, had thrived, had become everything Amara knew she would become. That was the only justice that mattered. Zara graduated from MIT with a PhD in aerospace engineering when she was 24, the youngest graduate in her program. She was recruited by every major aerospace company and defense contractor in the country. But she chose to work for her mother's company, Monroe Aviation Consulting, bringing fresh ideas and revolutionary designs. By the time she was 30, she held 17 patents. By 35, she was CEO of United Airlines, taking over from her mother who retired to focus on philanthropy. And by 40, she was the most powerful woman in aviation, period. She never forgot that day on Flight 447. How could she? It had shaped her, motivated her, driven her to prove that she belonged not just in first class but at the head of the table, making decisions that affected millions of travelers. Every policy she implemented, every training program she designed, every accountability measure she enforced, was informed by that 8-year-old girl who'd been called names and made to feel small but who'd refused to stay small. On the 20th anniversary of the incident, a reporter asked Zara if she'd forgiven Sharon Whitmore. Zara thought carefully before answering. "Forgiveness is complicated. I don't carry hatred for her. I don't wish suffering on her. She already suffered the natural consequences of her actions. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. I remember what she did. I remember how it felt. And I use that memory to make sure I create systems and cultures where it can't happen to anyone else. Maybe that's not traditional forgiveness. Maybe it's something else. But it's what I've got." Do you think she ever changed? Ever really understood what she did? I don't know. I hope so. I hope she looked at what her hatred cost her and chose something different. But honestly, it doesn't matter to me anymore whether she changed or not. What matters is that I didn't let her break me. What matters is that I turned the worst day of my childhood into a catalyst for systemic change. What matters is that kids flying today don't have to face what I faced. That's the victory. Not whether the person who hurt me ever felt sorry. The reporter nodded thoughtfully. What would you say to that 8-year-old Zara if you could talk to her now? Zara smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. I'd tell her that she's going to be okay. More than okay. I'd tell her that the people who tried to make her feel small were wrong, and she's going to prove it every single day for the rest of her life. I'd tell her that her mother is right, she belongs everywhere she chooses to be. And I'd tell her thank you for being brave enough to cry, to tell the truth, to let people help, because without her courage, without her vulnerability, none of the good that came after would have been possible. That interview went viral just like the original incident had 20 years earlier. But this time the story wasn't about hatred and harm. It was about resilience, about transformation, about how one person's worst day could become a catalyst for making the world better. Amara Monroe watched the interview from her home, now in her 60s but still sharp as ever, still involved in aviation consulting, still fighting for justice. She watched her daughter speak with such wisdom, such grace, such power, and she thought about that terrified little girl on the phone, crying about a cruel flight attendant, and she thought about the woman that little girl had become. She thought about Sharon Whitmore sometimes, wondered if the woman had ever found peace, ever confronted her demons, ever understood the magnitude of what she'd done and what it had cost her. She thought about all the Sharon Whitmores of the world, people carrying hate like a disease, infecting everyone they touched, destroying themselves in the process. But mostly she thought about change. Real, systemic, meaningful change. How United had gone from an airline that tolerated discrimination to one that led the industry in inclusion and accountability. How other airlines had followed suit, not out of goodness necessarily but because the business case became undeniable. How the culture of aviation had shifted slowly but perceptibly toward something better. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There were still incidents, still complaints, still work to do. But it was better. Measurably, meaningfully better. And that difference, that progress, had started with one little girl in seat 2A who'd been brave enough to cry, and one mother who'd been powerful enough to turn that pain into purpose. Years later, when Amara Monroe passed away at 83, beloved and celebrated, her obituary listed her many accomplishments. PhD from MIT at 27, founder of Monroe Aviation Consulting, CEO of Sky United Airlines, holder of 43 patents, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But the thing people remembered most, the thing that defined her legacy, was what she'd done after that phone call from Flight 447. How she transformed an entire industry because someone had hurt her child. At her funeral, Zara spoke about her mother with a voice that carried strength and sorrow in equal measure. My mother taught me that power without compassion is tyranny, and compassion without power is just sentiment. She had both. She used both. And when someone hurt me, she didn't just comfort me. She changed the world so no other child would have to hurt the way I hurt. That's who she was. That's the legacy she leaves. And that's the example I'll spend my life trying to live up to. The funeral was attended by aviation leaders from around the world, by politicians and activists and business titans. But also by dozens of ordinary people who'd been helped by Amara's policies, who'd filed discrimination complaints that were actually investigated, who'd been protected by systems Amara had built, who'd benefited from a culture she'd insisted on creating. One of them was a young black girl, maybe 9 years old, who approached Zara after the service. "My name is Aaliyah," she said shyly. "I fly a lot because my parents are divorced and I go back and forth. I just wanted to say thank you." "Thank you for what, sweetheart?" "For making it safe for me. I heard what happened to you when you were little. And I just wanted you to know that when I fly, everyone is nice to me. Nobody ever treats me bad. And my teacher said that's because of you and your mom. So thank you." Zara knelt down, looking into this child's eyes, seeing herself 20-some years ago. "You're welcome. And Aaliyah? You remember this, you belong in first class. You belong in the cockpit if you want to fly planes. You belong wherever your dreams take you. Don't let anyone ever tell you different." Aaliyah nodded seriously, then gave Zara a quick hug before running back to her parents. Zara watched her go, tears streaming down her face, knowing her mother would have loved this moment, would have seen it as confirmation that all the work, all the fighting, all the systemic change had been worth it. Because in the end, that's what it was all about. Not revenge against one cruel flight attendant. Not even justice, though justice mattered. It was about creating a world where little black girls could fly without fear, could take up space without apology, could dream without limitation. Sharon Whitmore had tried to make one little girl feel small. Instead, she'd inadvertently sparked a movement that made millions of people stand taller. She'd meant to put someone in their place. Instead, she'd helped create a world where everyone's place was wherever they chose to be. That's the thing about hatred. It always loses in the end. It might win battles, cause pain, inflict trauma. But love, justice, and accountability, those things endure. Those things change systems. Those things transform cultures. 20 years. 2 decades since that horrible flight. And the world was different now, measurably better, because one mother had refused to let her daughter's pain be meaningless. Because one little girl had been brave enough to cry and tell the truth. Because people like Robert and Jessica had stood up when it mattered. Because an entire industry had been forced to look at itself and change. The story of Flight 447 became a case study in business schools, discussing corporate accountability and crisis management. It became a teaching tool in diversity training across industries. It became a reminder that change is possible, that individuals can make a difference, that justice delayed might be justice denied, but justice pursued persistently can reshape the world. And somewhere, in first-class cabins around the world, little girls of every color sit in window seats and press their faces to the glass and dream of clouds and sky and possibility, never knowing the battles that were fought so they could sit there in peace, never needing to know, simply able to be. That's the legacy of Zara Monroe and Amara Monroe and everyone who stood up that day and in the days that followed. Not that they destroyed one woman's career, though they did. Not that they proved power can overcome hatred, though they did. But that they built something better from something terrible. They took one child's worst day and transformed it into countless children's better tomorrows. Sharon Whitmore called a little girl Blackie, and thought she'd taught her a lesson. Instead, she learned the hardest lesson of all, that hatred always costs more than you think you'll pay, that consequences are real, and that sometimes the people you hurt have the power to ensure you can never hurt anyone again. But more than that, she learned, or should have learned, in whatever moments of clarity she might have had before she died, that love is stronger than hate. That a mother's love for her daughter can move mountains and reshape industries. That the courage of one child can inspire systemic transformation. That justice, pursued with persistence and power, can actually win. The plane is landing now. Not Flight 447, but every flight, every day, carrying people who are a little safer, a little more protected, a little more assured that they belong, because 20 years ago a little girl cried and her mother heard, and the world, slowly but surely, changed. That's the story. That's what happened when hatred met its match at 35,000 feet. That's what happens when a billionaire's daughter gets called names by someone who doesn't know who she is. That's what happens when power meets purpose, when trauma transforms into change, when one person's worst day becomes everyone's better tomorrow. And if you're reading this, if you've followed Zara's journey from that terrified 8-year-old to the powerful CEO she became, then maybe you're asking yourself the right question. Not, what would I do if this happened to me? But rather, what am I doing to make sure it never happens to anyone? Because in the end, we're all on the same flight. We all share the same sky. And we all have a choice about whether we make that journey harder for each other or easier. Whether we tear down or build up. Whether we spread hate or fight it. Whether we're Sharon Whitmore or Robert Chen, the person inflicting pain or the person standing up against it. Choose wisely. Because somewhere, in some first-class cabin, in some corporate office, in some position of power you don't even know you're moving toward, you're going to face that choice. And the choice you make will define not just your own legacy but the world you leave behind. Zara Monroe chose courage. Amara Monroe chose accountability. Together they chose change. What will you choose?